The year was 1887, and autumn had bled its last gold into the moors. The house of Thornfield Hall rose above the valley like a sleeping beast, its windows hollow, its gardens tangled with brambles and the ghosts of roses. Few dared approach it. Fewer still returned unchanged. But Eleanor Vale had nowhere else to go. She arrived in a rattling carriage beneath a bruised sky, a trunk of books and grief her only company. A letter of employment clutched in her glove, governess to the ward of Lady Thornfield, a widow seldom seen beyond her estate gates. When the iron doors creaked open, a woman stood waiting. Tall. Dressed in black. Candlelight caught the silver in her hair. "Miss Vale," she said softly. "Welcome to Thornfield. I am Lady Isadora Thornfield." The air between them trembled, not from cold, but something deeper. Eleanor curtsied, heart already betraying her. The road to Thornfield twisted like a thought one shouldn't think. Mist gathered over the moors, soft and merciless, swallowing the horizon whole. Within the carriage, Eleanor Vale pressed her gloved hand to the windowpane, tracing the trails of rain as though they might spell out a future. She was 26, plain by society's cruel standards, though her eyes carried a quiet intelligence that frightened lesser men. And perhaps that was why she was alone, or why the world had forgotten her name so easily. The letter had arrived 2 weeks prior, written in a fine, careful hand. Lady Thornfield requires a governess for her ward. Discretion is expected. The pay generous. There had been no mention of why the previous governess had left. The carriage halted before a wrought iron gate, black with rust. Beyond it rose the mansion, tall, solemn, its towers clawing at the sky. Windows like closed eyes. Roofs slick with moss and sorrow. A man in a long coat emerged from the fog to open the gate. He did not speak as Eleanor passed him. She thought she saw pity flicker in his eyes. Inside, the entrance hall yawned wide, lined with portraits of women long dead. Their painted gazes followed her, unblinking. "Miss Vale," said a voice behind her. Eleanor turned, and time itself seemed to still. There stood Lady Isadora Thornfield. She was taller than Eleanor expected, dressed in deep mourning black. Her hair, though dark, held threads of silver that shimmered in the candlelight. Her beauty was not of youth but of gravity, a face carved from sorrow and strength. "You are punctual," said Isadora softly. "That is rare." "I thought it best to arrive before nightfall," Eleanor replied. Prudent. Thornfield prefers new guests not arrive after dark. Eleanor frowned. Prefers? But Lady Isadora was already turning away, the hem of her gown whispering across the marble like a secret. The first days passed beneath a silence so thick it felt alive. Thornfield's hall stretched like veins through a body that had long stopped breathing. Each door creaked as if in protest, each mirror held too much of the dark. Eleanor Vale had known loneliness before, the kind bred by poverty and indifference, but this was something different. This silence looked at her. She taught Clara Thornfield in the nursery each morning. The child was pale and delicate, with eyes the color of faded cornflowers and a voice barely more than a whisper. She was clever, quick with languages, but distracted, as if her attention were always drawn to something just beyond sight. "Miss Vale," she said one afternoon, while they copied Latin verbs by the window, "why does the lady in the mirror not blink?" Eleanor set down her pen. "What lady, Clara?" The girl pointed toward the tall standing glass in the corner, an antique framed in dark oak. Its surface rippled faintly in the dim light, though no breeze stirred. "The one who watches me when Lady Thornfield isn't here," Clara murmured. "She smiles sometimes. But her mouth doesn't move." Eleanor turned sharply to look, but saw only her own reflection, tired, uncertain, the faint shadow of grief in her eyes. She laughed lightly, though it felt forced. "Mirrors play tricks on the eyes, my dear. Especially in old houses." Clara did not smile back. "She knows your name too," she said softly. That night, Eleanor dreamt of the mirror. In her dream, the glass rippled like water, and from its depths two pale hands pressed outward, reaching, pleading, before a face appeared, half burned, half beautiful. When she awoke, her candle had guttered out, and the room smelled faintly of smoke and roses. In the following days, Eleanor began to notice strange details, the way portraits seemed to shift when she passed, how her reflection sometimes lagged a heartbeat behind her movements, how a cold draught always whispered from beneath the door of the west wing, though it had been sealed since the fire. During luncheon, she dared to ask Lady Thornfield about it. "The west wing, my lady," Eleanor said carefully. "Is it true that no one enters?" Isadora's spoon halted mid-motion. "It is uninhabitable." "Because of the fire?" "Because of what the fire revealed." Eleanor looked up. "And what was that?" Lady Thornfield's gaze met hers, a terrible, exquisite thing. "That love, Miss Vale, can burn more fiercely than any flame." She rose then, leaving her meal untouched. Later that evening, a storm came rolling across the moors. Wind clawed the windows, thunder made the chandeliers tremble. Eleanor wandered the corridors, restless, candle in hand. In one hallway she found a series of portraits, women of the Thornfield line, each painted with the same mournful eyes. The last portrait had been half-charred, its canvas blistered. Yet Eleanor could still see the image, two women entwined, one dark-haired, one fair, their fingers laced together over a single red rose. Lightning flashed, and for an instant, she thought she saw movement in the reflection of the glass that covered the painting. A hand, pale and trembling, reached from within. Then the thunder came, and the vision was gone. The next morning, she found a single withered rose lying on her desk, petals blackened at the edges. No one claimed to have placed it there. When Eleanor went to find Lady Thornfield, she discovered her standing before the tall windows of the great hall, eyes unfocused, whispering under her breath. "She is restless," Isadora murmured when Eleanor approached. "I feel her near." "Who?" "My wife." The silence between them deepened, thick, almost unbearable. Then, quietly, Isadora turned to her. "Do not go near the west wing, Miss Vale," she said. "Promise me." Eleanor nodded, but even as she did, something in her heart, that dangerous, curious ache, knew she would break that promise before long. Rain fell in thin, relentless sheets against the stone walls of Thornfield. Days blurred together beneath gray skies, and the house seemed to drink the gloom like wine. Eleanor Vale kept to her lessons with Clara, though the girl grew quieter with each passing hour. She no longer met Eleanor's eyes, as if afraid of what she might see reflected there. Once, when Eleanor brushed a stray curl from Clara's forehead, the child flinched. "She doesn't like you touching me," Clara whispered. "Who doesn't?" Eleanor asked. "The lady in the west wing." Eleanor tried to steady her breath. "There is no lady there, Clara. The wing is empty." "That's what she said you'd think." The word struck like a chill. Eleanor looked toward the corridor leading to the west wing, that stretch of shadow and silence that seemed to hum faintly at night, as if something within it were alive. The door. On the fourth night of the storm, Eleanor took a candle and ventured out. The air in the corridor was colder than the rest of the house. Wallpaper peeled like dried skin. The faint scent of ash lingered, and beneath it, the sweetness of roses gone to rot. She followed the scent until she reached a great oak door, iron-banded and scarred by flame. A chain and rusted lock sealed it shut. Yet as she raised her candle, she saw something scratched into the wood, a name, carved by a desperate hand. Ilara. Her heart tightened. That name again, the one whispered by servants, the one that seemed to haunt Lady Thornfield's every silence. Eleanor reached out, her fingertips brushing the scorched surface. The wood was warm, impossibly, as if a fire still burned on the other side. Then, from behind the door, came a sound. Soft. A woman's sob. Eleanor stumbled back, nearly dropping her candle. The next morning, she found Lady Isadora in the music room, seated at the piano. Her hands hovered above the keys, but she did not play. The light from the tall window made her seem carved of bone and shadow. "You were in the west wing last night," she said quietly, without turning. Eleanor froze. How did you know? Because the house told me. Isadora stood, the black silk of her gown whispering like the wings of a crow. There are rooms in Thornfield that remember too well. The West Wing is one of them. The night of the fire began there. It has not forgiven us. Eleanor swallowed. You speak as though it were alive. Perhaps it is. When one lives long enough with grief, Miss Vale, the walls begin to breathe it. Their eyes met. There was something raw in Isadora's, not fear, but yearning. The same aching loneliness that Eleanor had carried for years. Without thinking, Eleanor stepped closer. Then let me help you bear it. For a moment, it seemed Isadora might let her, might fall into her arms and end the centuries of silence between them. But then the woman turned away sharply, voice breaking. You cannot. To love me is to burn. That night, Eleanor could not sleep. The words replayed in her mind. To love me is to burn. She rose from bed and walked again to the West Wing, candle trembling in her hand. This time, the door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with dust and perfume, the kind that lingers on a lover's pillow. A shattered mirror leaned against the wall, its surface cracked into spiderwebs. In its shards, Eleanor's reflection split into a dozen fractured selves. A figure moved behind her in the reflection, tall, indistinct, wreathed in smoke. Isadora, Eleanor whispered, thinking she had followed. But the figure smiled, a smile of ruin. No, it said. The flame of her candle went out. Morning brought no peace. A pale sun trembled behind a curtain of mist, spilling no warmth upon the moors. Eleanor's candle from the night before still lay in her palm, the wick blackened though she scarcely remembered returning to her room. At breakfast, Lady Thornfield appeared wan, as if she too had not slept. Neither spoke of the West Wing. Clara's seat was empty, the servants muttered that the child had taken ill. Eleanor rose to check on her. In the nursery the girl sat upright in bed, eyes wide, hands clutching the coverlet. Miss Vale, she whispered, she's angry again. Who, dearest? The lady with the burnt face. She said you opened her door. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Before she could answer, thunder cracked over the moor, and the house shuddered, dust falling like ash from the beams above. The garden. When the storm passed, evening descended early. Lady Thornfield vanished from sight, the servants avoided questions. Drawn by an unease she could neither name nor resist, Eleanor took a lantern and stepped out into the gardens. The air smelled of wet earth and iron. Beyond the hedgerows lay a path overgrown with briars, the remnants of what must once have been a rose garden. The ground squelched beneath her boots, every footfall sinking into the memory of rain. She found the lady there. Isadora knelt before a marble stone half hidden by thorns, her gown trailing in the mud. The inscription was nearly swallowed by moss, but Eleanor made out the name nonetheless. Eleanor Thornfield, beloved wife, 1849 to 1880. Roses climbed over the grave, their petals the color of dried blood. Some still bloomed despite the chill, though when the wind stirred, they seemed to whisper. Eleanor hesitated before speaking. You loved her deeply. Isadora did not look up. Love is too gentle a word. We were bound, in passion, in pride, in sin. I thought I could keep her even from death. What happened? Isadora's hands clenched in the earth. She died in the fire that I called down myself. The ritual was meant to preserve her soul. I begged whatever God still listened to let us never part. She lifted her face then, tears left pale tracks through the soot that streaked her skin. They listened. Eleanor's lantern flickered. The air thickened with the scent of smoke and roses. Somewhere behind them a door slammed, though there were no doors in the open garden. She walks, Isadora whispered. Every year when the veil thins, she comes to claim what was promised. Eleanor stepped forward, the lantern shaking in her hand. Then let me stand with you. You do not understand, Miss Vale. Isadora rose, eyes gleaming with the last light of dusk. "If she cannot have me, she will take you." A gust snuffed the flame in Eleanor's lantern. In the sudden dark, the roses rustled, not in the wind, but as if something moved among them. A woman's silhouette, tall and limping, passed behind the thorns. The scent of burning hair filled the air. "Isadora," Eleanor breathed, "we must go." But when she turned, the widow was already staring into the darkness, lips parted in rapture and terror. "Ilara," she whispered. And the voice that answered came from everywhere at once. "You swore you would never forget me." When the servants found them later, the lantern lay shattered beside the grave. Lady Thornfield was unconscious, her dress streaked with ash. Eleanor knelt beside her, clutching her hand, whispering promises she could not name. Above them, the first full moon of October rose, cold, watchful, and red as blood. October arrived like a slow-burning ember. The moors beyond Thornfield Hall lay grey and empty, but inside the mansion, the air hummed with anticipation. Lanterns flickered in the corridors, and the scent of autumn roses mingled with the cold smoke of long-extinguished hearths. Lady Thornfield had sent word that a small gathering would be held on All Hallows' Eve, a rare event, for the house had not known laughter or music in many years. Eleanor found herself summoned to assist in preparations, her hands trembling as she laid black velvet and crimson candles across the tables. The ballroom. When the evening came, the ballroom was a cathedral of shadows. Candles dripped slow tears of wax, their flames trembling as though whispering secrets to the dark. Guests were few, distant relatives, a somber clergyman, and one curious scholar. All moved cautiously, aware of the house's weight, its unspoken histories. Eleanor entered in white, the color of innocence and snow, and paused at the doorway. There, across the hall, stood Isadora, in black lace, her hair pinned up with silver combs that caught the candlelight. The widow's eyes were dark, impossibly deep, reflecting both longing and warning. A string quartet began a slow, almost funerary melody. Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Shall we?" Isadora's voice came like silk and shadow. Eleanor's hand trembled as she took it. The moment their fingers laced, the air seemed to shiver. Shadows danced along the walls as if they had found new bodies. They moved together in silence, gliding across the marble, Eleanor's heart pounding in her chest. Each step drew them closer, closer than propriety allowed, closer than reason permitted. The music swelled, a single, yearning note that seemed to echo from the house itself. Eleanor looked up at Isadora, seeing not the widow, but the woman behind the grief, the one who had knelt at Ilara's grave, who had loved too fiercely to survive. "You should not," Isadora murmured, lips brushing Eleanor's ear, warm and trembling. "Then stop me," Eleanor replied softly. Their lips met. First gently, a whisper of a kiss, then with more urgency, more fire. The candles flickered as if the house itself inhaled sharply. Outside, a gust rattled the windows. Somewhere, a door slammed, unclaimed by any living hand. Eleanor felt the world tilt, the edges of reality blurring. She knew they should pull apart. She knew the warnings, the west wing, the spirit of Ilara, the curse that shadowed Isadora like smoke. Yet she could not. "Do you feel it too?" Eleanor whispered, breath mingling with hers. "Every heartbeat," Isadora admitted, voice breaking. "Do not tempt the fire, Eleanor." But the fire had already begun. When the dance ended, Eleanor found herself alone in the gallery, the echo of her heartbeat louder than the music. Shadows stretched across the walls, almost reaching for her. A faint sound, like a laugh, drifted from the west wing. She turned to leave, but the air thickened. The scent of smoke and roses, of ash and mourning, hung heavy. And somewhere in the dark, Eleanor felt the unmistakable weight of eyes upon her, patient, jealous, and filled with wrath. The ballroom was empty when Eleanor awoke the next morning, sunlight weak and pale through the tall windows. Her dress still smelled faintly of candle smoke and roses, and her cheeks burned as though the night had scorched them. Lady Isadora was nowhere to be found. Eleanor's pulse raced as she wandered through the corridors, following the scent of ash that clung to the walls like a shadow. The confession. She found Isadora in the library, kneeling before a fireplace that had long since gone cold. The widow's hands rested on the hearth, fingers curled as if clutching invisible embers. "Eleanor," she whispered, not turning. "You cannot imagine the weight of what you have done." I only followed you," Eleanor said softly. "I meant no harm." Isadora rose slowly, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears and fire. She came close enough for Eleanor to feel the warmth of her breath. "The house remembers every act, every thought, every sin," Isadora murmured. "Your presence here has awakened more than desire. You have stirred her." Eleanor's heart skipped. "Her?" "Elara," Isadora said, voice breaking. "My wife. The woman who should have died with me in the fire." She reached out, and Eleanor allowed her hand to be taken. Fingers laced, palms pressed together, hearts beating in sync. "And yet you kissed me," Isadora said, a trembling whisper. "Do you know what you have done?" "I could not help it," Eleanor admitted. The awakening. The first crack came from the west wing. A single, sharp snap of wood echoed through the mansion. Then another. And another. The house seemed to breathe, drawing them into its pulse. Mirrors shimmered as if liquid, shadows lengthened unnaturally, and somewhere, faintly, a woman's laughter rose, hollow, triumphant, bitter. "She's here," Isadora said, lips pressed to Eleanor's temple. "Elara remembers." Eleanor's stomach twisted with fear and fascination. A cold wind whipped through the library, though the windows were closed. The pages of the open books rustled, lifting as if unseen hands sought to read them. "We cannot deny her," Isadora said. "But we may choose how we face her." Eleanor swallowed. "And if we fail? Then Thornfield will remember our love as it remembers every sin, in fire and ashes." The first warning. That night, Eleanor dreamt of Elara. Her hair was scorched, her face half-shadowed and half-blazing, eyes hollow yet burning with accusation. "You promised me eternity," the spectre hissed. "Now another takes my place." Eleanor woke to the sound of wood groaning in the west wing, and the faint, unearthly scent of roses burned into her pillow. She found Isadora waiting in the corridor, candle in hand, gown trailing like smoke. "Do you understand now?" Isadora whispered, lips brushing Eleanor's ear. "Love here is not a gift. It is a trial." Eleanor nodded, trembling, yet beneath the fear, a fire had begun to burn. One that defied logic, reason, and warning. "Then we face it together," she said. Isadora's eyes softened, a brief, fragile smile touching her lips. "Together," she agreed. And somewhere, deep within the walls of Thornfield, a door slammed shut, not to keep them out, but to keep something in. The following morning, Eleanor awoke to a silence thick with anticipation. The storm had passed, leaving the moors blanketed in mist. Yet the air inside Thornfield Hall carried a weight heavier than any tempest outside. She wandered through the corridors, her footsteps echoing like whispers of the past. Something drew her to a narrow passage behind the library, one she had never noticed before. There, hidden beneath a velvet curtain, was a door. Its hinges were stiff, its wood polished dark from age. With trembling hands, Eleanor drew back the curtain. The portrait. The room beyond was small and dust-choked, illuminated only by a shaft of weak sunlight from the grimy window. Against the far wall stood a portrait, covered in a thick layer of grime and shadow. Eleanor wiped at the surface and gasped. Two women were painted with exquisite, haunting detail, one dark-haired, her eyes full of sorrow, and one fair, her expression soft yet sorrowful. Their fingers intertwined over a single red rose. At the base, the inscription read, "Isadora and Elara, eternally bound." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, tracing the painted fingers. She could feel the pull of the love captured on the canvas, intense, tragic, eternal. "You found it," a voice said behind her. Startled, Eleanor turned. Lady Isadora stood in the doorway, black lace falling around her like midnight. Her eyes were shadowed but luminous, reflecting grief and longing in equal measure. It was hidden because none should see what binds us, Isadora said softly. But you have eyes that do not look away. The letters. Isadora led Eleanor to a small desk beneath the portrait. Dust-covered letters and journals lay in a neat pile, preserved as though by magic. Read them, Isadora urged. Eleanor picked up the top letter, written in delicate, flowing script. It was from Eleanor to Isadora, tender, passionate, and despairing. If you ever survive me, know that my love will haunt this house until the end of our days. I cannot leave you, I cannot let you forget me. Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes. She read the following letters, each revealing a deeper truth. The fire had not been accidental, but a cursed ritual meant to preserve their bond beyond death. Eleanor's spirit lingered, jealous and unforgiving, tied to Thornfield by a love so fierce it could not rest. She will not forgive easily, Isadora whispered. And she will not allow another to take my place. Eleanor met her gaze. Then we face her. Together. Isadora's fingers brushed Eleanor's cheek, hesitant and trembling. You do not understand what this means, she said. Love here is dangerous. It can consume you, as it has consumed me. Then let us burn together, Eleanor replied softly, her hand finding Isadora's. The warning. As they stood before the portrait, the air grew heavy. Shadows pooled at the corners of the room, and the faint scent of roses and smoke filled Eleanor's nostrils. A chill pressed against her skin. Somewhere deep within Thornfield, a door creaked, the west wing calling. A soft, mocking laugh echoed, carrying a promise Eleanor could not ignore. She is awake, Isadora said, voice tight with anguish. And now, she knows you exist. Eleanor swallowed, heart pounding. Then let her come. Be careful, Isadora whispered. Once she steps forward, there is no turning back. They stood together, hand in hand, staring at the portrait, two women bound by love and fire, shadows and longing, ready to face the wrath of the past. Halloween night descended upon Thornfield Hall like a silent predator, wrapping the estate in shadows deeper than any storm. The moors were shrouded in mist, and the wind carried the faint scent of smoke and charred roses. Inside, the house pulsed with life that was not its own. Eleanor paced the gallery, her fingers trailing over the cracked banisters, listening for the sound she dreaded and longed for. The west wing loomed ahead, its doors sealed but throbbing, as if the heart of the house itself beat behind them. Are you ready? Isadora's voice broke the silence. She stood beside Eleanor, black lace trailing across the marble floor, eyes luminous with fear and desire. As ready as I'll ever be, Eleanor said, gripping her hand. The awakening. A single candle flickered to life in the west wing, though no hand had touched it. Shadows twisted along the walls. Then came a whisper, rising from the flames that had never truly died. You promised me eternity. The air grew hot, thick with the smell of roses burning, and from the smoke emerged a figure, Lady Thornfield, pale, scorched, and luminous, her eyes twin fires of accusation and grief. Isadora fell to her knees, hands raised in surrender. Eleanor, please, she whispered. Eleanor stepped forward, heart pounding. I am not afraid, she said, voice steady though her body trembled. I love her too. Eleanor's gaze snapped to Eleanor, eyes narrowing. The house groaned as if in pain, mirrors cracking and flames licking at the walls without consuming them. Another takes my place? Eleanor hissed, voice like breaking glass. We face you together, Isadora said, rising, her hand finding Eleanor's. The mansion convulsed. Chandeliers swung, casting shattered patterns of light and shadow. Doors slammed, and the scent of smoke thickened into a choking haze. Eleanor floated closer, ethereal and terrible, her arms outstretched. Flames danced across the floor, rising like serpents that hissed their anger. Stay behind me, Eleanor said, gripping Isadora tightly. No, Isadora said firmly. We do not hide from the past. We face it. The trio faced each other in the heart of Thornfield's haunted west wing. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The flames reflected in their eyes, turning the world into fire and shadow. Eleanor stepped forward. "We do not seek to replace you," she said, voice strong and unwavering. "We only seek to love. And love cannot be destroyed." Eleanor hesitated. Her fire flickered, the smoke curling around her like a cloak. Then, a shudder passed through the room, the mansion itself seemed to sigh. The choice. Eleanor's gaze softened, but only for a heartbeat. "Then prove it," she said. "Prove that your love can endure the flames that claimed mine." Eleanor felt Isadora's trembling fingers in hers. Together, they stepped forward into the center of the room. The fire surged, yet they did not recoil. The walls shimmered, the mirrors quivered, and the air itself seemed to crackle with energy. For the first time, Eleanor understood, love here was not gentle. It was a trial by fire, a test of devotion, courage, and the willingness to face death itself. "We will not falter," Eleanor whispered. And in that moment, the flames roared higher, the shadows swirled, and the curse of Thornfield Hall awakened fully, ready to test them both. The night air inside Thornfield Hall was thick with smoke and the faint tang of roses. Eleanor's head throbbed from the heat, from the fire that did not consume, and from the presence that pressed on her mind. Eleanor's spirit lingered, not confined by walls, but moving through the shadows like liquid flame. She whispered in Eleanor's ear, soft, seductive, chilling. "You do not belong here. Why cling to her when I could give you freedom?" Eleanor spun, candle trembling in her hand, but saw no one. Only the darkness shifted, rippling, curling around her. "I am not afraid of you," Eleanor said, voice firm though her body shook. A laugh, hollow and beautiful, echoed through the hall. The mirrors reflected not Eleanor, but her face intertwined with Isadora's, their lips meeting in a kiss Eleanor had not yet dared. "She would die for you," Eleanor whispered, voice curling around her mind like smoke. "Would you die for her?" The temptation. In the library, the firelight flickered, forming shapes that Eleanor could not resist watching. Shadows turned to figures, and the figures whispered, offering comfort, offering release. "I can show you peace," Eleanor murmured. "Abandon her. Leave this cursed place. Take me instead, and fear and longing will end." Eleanor's knees weakened, her heart torn. The weight of centuries pressed down upon her, the knowledge that every woman who had loved in Thornfield had met despair, if not death. Isadora's hand found hers. Warm. Solid. Real. "Do not listen to her," Isadora whispered, trembling. "I cannot protect you from her, but I can protect you from doubt. Trust me." I want to," Eleanor stammered. "Then choose me," Isadora said. "Here, now. We face her together, or not at all." The struggle. The shadows around Eleanor thickened, wrapping her in visions of a life with Alara, passion, safety, freedom from fear, but it was hollow. Every whisper, every caress, carried the faint smell of smoke and ash, of sorrow unending. Eleanor felt herself drawn, almost involuntarily, toward the phantom. Yet with Isadora's grip on her hand, her heart beat a steady, defiant rhythm. "No," Eleanor whispered. "I will not leave her. I will not leave you." The flames of the west wing flickered violently, casting twisted shapes across the walls. Alara screamed, a sound that was both rage and heartbreak, echoing through the halls of Thornfield, and yet Eleanor's resolve did not falter. "Enough!" Isadora cried. Her voice, cracked with grief and determination, pierced the shadows. "She cannot take us. Not if we stand together." The spirit paused, the temperature dropped, the hall shivered, and for a moment, it seemed the house itself listened. The choice affirmed. Eleanor drew a deep breath, feeling the warmth of Isadora's hand anchor her to the present. Together, they stepped forward, refusing to flee. "We will not falter," Eleanor repeated, more firmly now. "We will face this together." And though Alara's spirit lingered, watching with eyes that burned like coals. A shift occurred. The whispers softened, the shadows recoiled, and the mansion seemed to breathe a long, shuddering sigh. Love, Eleanor realized, was not gentle here. But it was theirs, bright, defiant, and alive. Halloween night had fallen in a black velvet sky, the moon pale and watchful above Thornfield Hall. The moors outside writhed in mist, and the wind carried the faintest whispers of morning roses. Inside, Eleanor and Isadora stood before the west wing. Its door, scarred and iron-bound, pulsed with a life of its own. Smoke curled from beneath the cracks, carrying the faint scent of ash and something sweeter, longing, desire, grief. "Are you certain?" Eleanor asked, gripping Isadora's hand. "As certain as I've ever been," Isadora replied. Her voice shook, yet her eyes burned with the same defiant fire Eleanor had seen before. "This is where it ends, or begins again." The confrontation. The door creaked open at their touch. Inside, the west wing was alive with spectral flame. Mirrors shimmered and cracked, reflecting twisted images, Eleanor's face with Alara's eyes, Isadora's lips on the phantoms, fire licking at every shadow. "You have come," Alara's voice hissed, echoing like smoke through the hall. Her figure shimmered in the flames, pale, scorched, radiant with accusation and longing. Isadora stepped forward, holding Eleanor close. "We do not come to replace you," she said. "We come to face you. Together." The house groaned and shivered as if approving or mocking. Flames leapt from floorboards, swirling around the trio like serpents of fire and shadow. Mirrors cracked, sending shards of reflected light across the room. Eleanor felt the heat against her skin, the pull of Alara's spirit, the weight of centuries pressing down. Her pulse hammered. "You cannot claim me," Eleanor said, voice trembling but firm. "I love her, I will not be taken by fear or by ghost." The trial of fire. Alara screamed, a sound of fury and heartbreak that made the walls quake. Flames surged higher, yet Eleanor and Isadora did not flinch. They clasped hands, hearts aligned, and stepped forward into the inferno. Time seemed to stretch. The house itself writhed, smoke and shadows forming into the shape of a woman, her eyes searing, her fingers clawing at their resolve. "Then prove your love," she demanded. Eleanor's gaze met Isadora's. "Together," Eleanor said. "Together," Isadora echoed. And so they did. Step by step, heart by heart, they faced the fire. Each flicker of flame tested their courage, each whisper of the past tested their devotion. But their bond, forged in longing, grief, and unspoken desire, did not break. The west wing trembled, smoke curling, mirrors shattering, and then, for the first time in decades, a silence fell. Alara's spirit hovered, watching, waiting. Her gaze softened, sorrow bleeding through the anger. "You have endured," she whispered. "Perhaps, you may remain." The aftermath. The flames subsided. Smoke lingered, curling like gentle fingers, and the west wing lay still. Eleanor and Isadora, hands entwined, were singed and exhausted but alive. The house seemed to sigh, a long, shuddering breath that carried both warning and relief. Eleanor turned to Isadora, face streaked with soot and tears. "We did it," she whispered. Isadora smiled, fragile but real, brushing a hand over Eleanor's cheek. "Not for us alone," she said. "For her, for all of us bound here by love and fire." The first pale light of dawn seeped through the windows, painting Thornfield Hall in silver and ash. Outside, the moors stretched endlessly, mist curling like the fingers of ghosts laid to rest. Inside, the two women stood together, their bond unbroken, their hearts alight with a love that would endure, even in the shadow of Thornfield's curse. The west wing lay in ruins, but the house itself seemed quieter now, as if holding its breath. Shadows lingered in the corners, softened by the first pale light of dawn. Eleanor and Isadora emerged from the darkness, hands still clasped, bodies exhausted from fire, fear, and longing. For a moment, neither spoke. The world felt suspended, the weight of centuries pressing down, the echo of Alara's sorrow fading like mist. "We have survived," Eleanor whispered, though her voice trembled. "Yes," Isadora replied softly. Her eyes glimmered, haunted and luminous. "But Thornfield remembers everything. Every love, every loss, every fire that consumed it all." Eleanor looked at her. "Then let it remember this, us. The choice." A wind stirred in the ruins, cold and sweet. Eleanor felt it brush her skin, carrying with it the faint scent of roses and smoke. Somewhere, deep within the walls, a voice whispered, "Do not leave me." Eleanor turned. Isadora's face was pale, her lips trembling. "If we stay," she said, "the curse may claim us. The house, it will not forgive another love so fierce." Eleanor's fingers tightened around hers. "Then we stay together," she said. "Whatever comes, we face it. We love, or we die." Tears glistened in Isadora's eyes. "Together," she whispered. "The final embrace." They stepped forward into the heart of the ruined west wing. The fire had left only ash and shadow, yet the air shimmered with the memory of flame. Eleanor pressed her forehead to Isadora's, their breaths mingling, hearts aligned. "I love you," Eleanor said. "I have always loved you," Isadora replied. They kissed, a long, shivering, defiant kiss. The world seemed to tilt and the walls of Thornfield groaned, echoing the intensity of their bond. For a moment, the curse stirred, reaching for them with icy fingers, threatening to tear them apart. But Eleanor and Isadora clung to each other, their love blazing brighter than any fire, stronger than any spirit, defying the mansion's wrath. A final, brilliant glow enveloped them. The ashes swirled, and the house seemed to exhale, releasing centuries of grief, anger, and longing. The end, or eternity. When the wind settled and the first light of morning shone through the broken windows, Eleanor and Isadora were gone. In their place, only shadows remained, two figures entwined, dancing forever among the ruins, bodies consumed but spirits unbroken. Thornfield Hall fell silent. The roses in the garden, blackened by years and ash, bloomed red again as if nourished by love itself. Villagers whispered of ghostly lights in the west wing each Halloween, two women, one in black, one in white, dancing among the ashes, a testament to a love that refused to die. Even Alara's spirit, once wrathful and jealous, hovered quietly in the shadows, a witness to what she could not destroy, the bond of two hearts daring enough to love beyond life and death. And so, the curse endured, but so did their love, eternal and untamed, echoing in every whisper of wind and every scar of Thornfield Hall. Decades had passed. Thornfield Hall stood as a ruin on the moors, its windows dark, its walls cracked, yet it remained, stubborn and defiant against time. Villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, telling tales of shadows and whispers, of ghostly lights that danced among the ash and ivy. The rose garden, once blackened by fire, now bloomed every autumn, petals crimson against the gray of the stone. Locals claimed the roses moved as if alive, curling gently toward the wind, toward some unseen presence. The visitors. On a cold October morning, a young historian arrived in the village, carrying journals and letters recovered from the estate. Among them were Eleanor Vale's notes, Isadora's letters, and the meticulously preserved chronicles of Lady Thornfield. As she read, the historian felt a shiver pass through her. The story was not of ghosts, but of love, eternal and unbroken. They dared to love beyond life, beyond fear, beyond the curse, she whispered to herself. In the ruins of the west wing, sunlight glimmered on shards of glass and blackened wood. For a brief instant, the historian thought she saw movement, two figures, one dark, one fair, spinning in a dance of light and shadow, their hands entwined, their eyes locked in a gaze that defied mortality. Decades had passed. Thornfield Hall stood as a ruin on the moors, its windows dark, its walls cracked, yet it remained, stubborn and defiant against time. Villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, telling tales of shadows and whispers, of ghostly lights that danced among the ash and ivy. The rose garden, once blackened by fire, now bloomed every autumn, petals crimson against the gray of the stone. Locals claimed the roses moved as if alive, curling gently toward the wind, toward some unseen presence. The visitors. On a cold October morning, a young historian arrived in the village, carrying journals and letters recovered from the estate. Among them were Eleanor Vale's notes, Isadora's letters, and the meticulously preserved chronicles of Eleanor Thornfield. As she read, the historian felt a shiver pass through her. The story was not of ghosts, but of love, eternal and unbroken. They dared to love beyond life, beyond fear, beyond the curse, she whispered to herself. In the ruins of the west wing, sunlight glimmered on shards of glass and blackened wood. For a brief instant, the historian thought she saw movement, two figures, one dark, one fair, spinning in a dance of light and shadow, their hands entwined, their eyes locked in a gaze that defied mortality. Turn on notifications bell to never miss a story. Share your thoughts in the comments, we love hearing from our viewers.